Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sir Hunt on X on this Tuesday, the 7th of October in the calendar year 2025. Here's everyone hoping that they have themselves a wonderful day today. Lots to get to, including an earthshaker here in the state of Ohio. We also relive an historical moment for one of the all-time great running backs in NFL history, as we touch on news in the world of at the NFL and boxing, among many others. But I'm going to get right down to it. Of course, I'm going to start what took place last night in Jacksonville. It was a big home win for the Jacksonville Jaguars coming to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. You seldom see games where a Super Bowl championship caliber team like Kansas City beats themselves. And basically, that's what happened last night. We talk about self-inflicted wounds. 13 penalties. You're basically begging for a loss. Let's start with that. The pick six by Mahomes to Devin Lloyd, which changed everything from that point forward, because Kansas had that game virtually under control. Looked like they had a chance to really seize control, but I don't know what Mahomes was thinking throwing that pass where Devin Lloyd just took it to the house, 99 yards. And basically from that point, the momentum shifted, and Jacksonville had it, and Kansas lost it. And, of course, the final winning drive, you know what happened in the last play where Trevor Lawrence just falls down. Nobody bothers to go after him. Kansas is sitting there looking at him, and Lawrence just stumbles into the end zone for a touchdown virtually untouched. I seldom like to say teams beat themselves because it's a two-headed monster. Somebody has to beat you because you're not playing yourself. But when you have the amount of self-inflicting wounds that took place last night with the Kansas City Chiefs, it's on them. I mean, Mahomes had the pick six that changed everything. And from that point forward, everything from Kansas just went flat. I mean, they were rolling after they beat the Ravens in the second half against the Giants. They seemed to find themselves. But after that pick six by Mahomes to the end of the game, they went splat. And I don't know what happened, especially on the defensive side. I know Trent McDuffie had the terrific interception to set up a go-ahead touchdown late in the game. But even then, the Kansas City Chiefs defense just fell apart after Mahomes threw the pick six. Also didn't help that the offense wasn't all that great either. That's from the Kansas perspective. But for Jacksonville, probably the biggest win they had in quite some time in the history of that franchise, given all they've been through, all the bad luck they've had. To see them back on the map, it's actually a good thing. There's questions coming into how good they were, but I'd say that defense is as opportunistic as you can get. I mean, they got to Mahomes, they got the pick six. I think Devin Lloyd leads the league in interceptions, but that 99-yard pick six changed everything for Jacksonville, and they capitalized on it. Big win at home last night for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they're probably going to be the favorites moving forward and win the AFC South. When people thought there was going to be a borderline 500 team, yours truly being one of them. I'll eat some crow on that one. But kudos to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Nice win moving forward. Of course, the setup was the pass play from Trevor Lawrence to Travis Hunter. Of course, there's a lot of debates and questions to how much he'll impact this league at some point. And, of course, whether the Jaguars gave up so much draft capital to get him, which I think they did. But he made the play to set up the game winner. Kudos to Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Big win, Duval. That's for you guys down there in the southeastern part of the states. Kudos, well-deserved win. Earned it. Now we're going to fast forward to the big news that just took place earlier today and had the state of Ohio earthquaking a little bit. I'm talking both sides. Seldom you see interdivisional trades, especially the AFC North, where some of the rivalries are just pure hatred. I mean, before I proceed, it's like the equivalent of the Ravens and the Steelers at the Apex swapping Ben Roethlisberger for Ray Lewis. I mean, that's how much hatred the AFC North is. No way that kind of trade is even the deepest thought of their imagination. But what took place today between the Browns and the Bengals pretty much set a lot of things on fire. And it was the trade, Joe Flacco and a sixth to the Bengals for a fifth. I'll touch on that in a second. Like the third time, someone pulled this up. This is the third time in this decade we had an interdivision trade involving some form of a starting quarterback. 2001, it was Drew Bledsoe going to the Bills from the Patriots. We know the story of that one. That was when Tom Brady won the Super Bowl and took over. And in 2010, Donovan McNabb going from Philadelphia to Washington. And here in 2025, Joe Flacco going from Cleveland to Cincinnati. We know the reasons for it. I'll try to break this down the best I can because everyone is all over the place. Good, bad, pretty, and ugly. Let's start with the Cleveland angle first. I mean, the guy basically was benched. I mean, the guy's probably not. It was about time he was going to get benched because they need to see what they have in Dylan Gabriel, who I said didn't look good, but didn't look bad either in a loss in Minnesota, and they had to move forward with him. So that's what they had. When you talk about this particular situation on the Cleveland angle, and you still have Shedeur Sanders. They have some nice pieces moving forward. I mean, they have a talented roster, but we know the Cleveland Browns coaching staff and the front office doesn't know how to situate themselves on a steady quarterback. And they made the moves to get, of course, in the draft, Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. They got to see at some point what they have. Maybe trading Joe Flacco might be the way to go for this one. Of course, they added Bailey Zapp to the practice squad. It's been a couple years in the New England Patriots practice squad, and I think played some few games with them. So that's from the Cleveland angle. So they had to move on at some point. When they benched Joe Flacco, I thought they benched him maybe 2 games too late. But, they should have moved on to Gabriel sooner. But it is what it is. That's why they're the Cleveland Browns. So that's that angle of it. So now we come to our angle here in Cincinnati. And everyone has their panties all up in the bunch both ways. From the morons who think they're going to all of a sudden go make a run and win the Super Bowl to the middle tier fair weather morons who think both ways to this guy's going to be worse than Jake Browning. The guy's a 40-year-old quarterback. This guy's not going to be the prime, not going to be a prime Dan Marino. He's not going to be a prime Tom Brady. He's not going to be a prime Peyton Manning. Let's get that out of the way. All right. He's not going to be any of those guys. You guys can just shut up with that. That's number one. Number two, I mean, the one thing he will do is he's going to take some chances downfield, which is going to help Jamar Chase, Noah Fant, and the scrubs down there. And that's what's going to happen when we talk about Chase and Fant, when the wide receiver and tight end for the Bengals. We have a guy that's going to take chances. You're going to get a lot of things. I mean, you're going to get the big plays. You're going to good and bad. I know Flacco has 6 interceptions this season, but I'd rather see a quarterback take a shot downfield, and risk it than play, ultra conservative with checkdowns that we saw over the last 3 weeks here in Cincinnati. So in that aspect, we talk about Jamar Chase, Noah Fant, and the rest of the receiving core. It's going to help them somewhat. But the bigger issue that everybody misses is the same thing that's been going on for the last 6 years. Is you have an offensive line who can't protect a defense of 11 statues on the field, and that's where it's might be the one that hurts them in the end with this. As I said, it doesn't matter who you put at quarterback. Whoever is the quarterback for the Bengals has to go behind an offensive line that can't protect themselves from 11 statues coming at them. That's how bad the offensive line for the Cincinnati Bengals is. I mean, he's going to make the play. I mean, Flacco, I think, is going to be good enough to make plays. Is it going to be enough to win games? More than likely not, because you're asking a 40-year-old quarterback to just come in here and all of a sudden play superhero. That's not going to be done. It at least put a little jolt in that locker room, which is what was needed after what took place in the last 3 weeks. That I'll give you. And when you have a Super Bowl winner like that, it'll help the morale a little bit, because nobody outside of him and the rest of the quarterbacks, there was nobody on the roster that was capable of this after the Joe Burrow injury. We all know it. I mean, I'm always going to support Jake Browning. I think everybody should also. But the same thing I say with Jake Browning, I'm going to say it with Joe Flacco, and I say it both ways. Support him, ride with him. I mean, at this point, it's not about wins or losses. It's about just doing what you can to boost the morale, because that's what's needed right now, especially in lieu of the moronic Bengals fans decide to show up in grocery bags Sunday, which makes them like the biggest bunch of cowards dressed like thieves in the night. And that needs to stop. But Joe Flacco is going to do the best he can to make plays for the Bengals to keep Jamar Chase and Noah Fant happy. Other than that, don't expect anything more than that. Doesn't mean to equate to wins and losses. More likely not going to matter much in that regard, because this barely moves a needle. I mean, you're talking about a 40-year-old Joe Flacco. If it was a 30-year-old Joe Flacco, yeah, we might be having a different conversation. But this is a 40-year-old Joe Flacco we're talking about here. And he didn't play all that great in the 4 games that he played for Cleveland before he was benched. But he'll probably eventually be inserted in the starting lineup. Everybody's saying Sunday. I think it's a little too quick. maybe Thursday when they host Pittsburgh here for the whiteout game. I'll be there with my show, and we'll see what happens then. Just be optimistic, but also be realistic. Don't expect this to result in wins and losses, because now we have morons in the community, as the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, think they're going to win the Super Bowl and win the division all of a sudden. That's not happening. But do support him. Do cheer him on. Do what you can to get him uplifted, because right now we need some morale around here. And that's more important than wins and losses. Let's get the morale going first, because Joe Flacco is basically going to uplift that a little bit. What again? Does it mean wins and losses? I'm not going to go that far yet, because there needs to be a lot more obviously done. But he's going to put the ball in the right places for guys like Jamar Chase and Noah Fant to succeed. That's all you can ask for right now. Just support him, back him. It'll say a lot about you in the end. And stop wearing grocery bags on your heads, because you look like the biggest bunch of cowards in Cincinnati with criminal records. That's how bad you guys look when it comes to wearing grocery bags on your heads. Just the biggest group of cowards walking right now. Again, I'm not one of those super fans who say the things that they do, but I just don't like it. It's just, you look like a thief looking to commit a crime when you wear a grocery bag on your head. And that's terrible. Now to another trade that took place just minutes after this. This one's a big of a shocker. It was Baltimore trading Odafe Oweh to the Los Angeles Chargers. Can't think of a player's name. It was a safety and a solid one. A swap of a draft picks. Odafe Oweh was basically hitting. I know he had one good year, but he's basically hit and miss for the last couple of years over there in Baltimore. And when he had Mike Green playing double the snaps that Odafe Oweh has, and with an $8 million expiring contract, it's probably the best thing to do is get something out of him, and that's what Baltimore did. What does it mean moving forward? Nobody knows, because we know that defense needs a total makeover, given how bad they've looked so far this season. And they talk about the worst defense in the NFL, at least stats-wise. Interesting here, given the fact that when you have the defense as it is, remember, here's one of the pieces in the Ravens-Chiefs trade a few years ago that landed Kansas City Orlando Brown Jr. And Odafe Oweh, he had his moments, good and bad, but this is probably about getting something in return, because the guy likely was not going back to Baltimore. And Eric DeCosta did a smart thing, I thought. Get something in return. Got a solid safety. I can't remember the individual's name off the top of my head, but from all the reports I read, he's going to help a secondary that's been absolutely beat up a little bit, because without Kyle Hamilton back there and guys like Nate Wiggins and Jair Alexander out, that secondary has been absolutely cooked. Now, will it help this defense moving forward? I mean, you can't get any worse than the last in the league, right? So, again, I thought it's a case of getting something, because they're likely going to lose Odafe Oweh for basically nothing. They say they probably would have got a compensatory pick out of it. I don't know how the process works with that. But, there's probably the smart move by Baltimore moving on from him. Now, Mike Green, the second-round draft pick out of Marshall, he's going to get the more snaps. They've been wanting this guy to get to see the field more, and he's more than likely going to get it. They're still going to need another edge rusher opposite him. They're also going to need a defensive tackle now that Madubuike is out for the year and Broderick Washington's out for a minute. But it seems like more moves are coming for Baltimore, and they're ready to just clean house, because the last couple years, after losing to Kansas in the AFC title game 2 years ago, they've bottomed out. Let's see where this one goes. I expect more moves to be made. Baltimore's eventually going to be fine. I think they're taking the right moves here. They also talked about moving on from Mark Andrews, who's got a big cap hit. It makes sense. Probably send him down to Tampa to reunite with his Oklahoma teammate Baker Mayfield, which I think it will be a good combination down there like it was in Oklahoma. But the Ravens are going to be making moves here soon, which I don't blame them, because at this point, you might as well, because guys aren't coming back. Might as well get some value out of it if you can. Amazing. The trade deadline is still a month away, and we already started the explosions of this. Little did I thought that it would be the two teams who would pick the two favorites out of the AFC North doing this. But given the circumstances that has taken place, I understand it. Now we're going to touch on some history in the NFL today, and this is the first time I've ever done this. And we're going to go back 40 years to what took place at Soldier Field in Chicago, Illinois. This was the great Walter Payton surpassing Jim Brown for the all-time rushing yards lead At that time, I can't remember the numbers, over 12,300 plus, to where Walter Payton eventually got to 16,726. When you coined the phrase perfect player in the NFL, widely across the board at that time, it was pointed at a player named Walter Payton. They called him sweetness for a reason, and he showed it. The beauty and the elegance of the running back position was displayed by him at the time. Now I can probably say the greatest running back of that era, maybe arguably the greatest football player at the time of his era, and I think it's not even close. The beauty, the elegance, the way he did it, the way he carried himself, not just on the field, but also off it, specifies what kind of embodiment Walter Payton was when he was dressed for the Chicago Bears for his entire career. And we talk about what took place on this day. It was a number of 12,312, which he broke the record 41 years ago today at Soldier Field, surpassing Jim Brown. He held that record for the better half of 18 years until that was broken by Emmitt Smith. But when we talk about the premier running backs in NFL history and the guys that embodied their position the way you could say any player does, Walter Payton embodied the NFL running back position for his time when you talk about how he carried himself on and off the field and how he played the game. We can coin the phrase the right way every single which way possible, and there's no real clear-cut definition of what the right way is. But when you talk about Walter Payton and how he played the game for the Chicago Bears and what he did 41 years ago today to break the rushing record, that tells you just what the man embodied. I mean, the guy has a award named after him, the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award. That should tell you something right here. Now we talk about what he did at the time his career was over. This guy basically had every single rushing record imaginable. Now, some of it is eventually broken, but when he retired, you could argue he was far and away the greatest running back in NFL history. I mean, think about this for a second. 16,700 career yards, 110 career rushing touchdowns, 77 games of over 100 yards, 10 1,000-yard rushing seasons, career all-purpose yards of over 21,800, 275-yard game, single-yard rushing game, 492 receptions as a running back, almost 4,500 yards receiving yards as a running back, 125 career touchdowns, and over 3,800 carries. That's the embodiment of what Walter Payton and his game was during a time when the running back position was so valued, and he was one of those ones of a rare breed during his time. Remember, this is a more physical game. We're talking about back in the 70s and 80s. I mean, you could literally hit guys. It's not like what we have today. You're talking about a game back in the 80s where you can hit guys. And what made Walter Payton such a tough cover was not his quickness and his elusiveness and that little stutter step he had, like what you see in the NBA. He was his strength was underrated. There are guys that basically said, we couldn't tackle this guy. I mean, even Lawrence Taylor, arguably the greatest defensive player in NFL history, said, this guy might be the greatest player ever. And that says a whole lot coming from a guy like Lawrence Taylor, the standout linebacker for the Giants for many years. And we talk about what he did, his overall numbers. Think about this for a second. We talk about having 16,700 rush yards at that time of the NFL. It meant something. Players don't even barely get to 10,000 today. I mean, probably the two that were closest are Saquon Barkley of the Eagles and Derrick Henry of Baltimore, because they're a bit of the throwback of what guys like Walter Payton were. Remember, back then, it was more about balance in the NFL. We talk about the pass-run ratio compared to what we have today, where it's basically pass only. And Walter Payton, for that time, he was the man amongst boys. People had a hard time tackling him. People had a hard time, staying in front of him because he wasn't necessarily super quick, but he was slick in the sense that he made just that little move that made you miss him by a lot. That's what Walter Payton was. This is before we had guys like Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, LaDainian Tomlinson, and even guys today, like I said, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. Maybe a top 10, not just a top all-time great running back, but you probably argue just as an overall NFL player, pound for pound by position, top 10 all time. That's what made Walter Payton just sensationally great. And we talk about some of the all-time greatest running backs in NFL history. Is of course Walter Payton is going to may have the distinction of the greatest. Of course, they up in the northeastern Ohio would always say Jim Brown. No argument there, because Jim Brown was the first that broke all kinds of barriers for running backs when he was with the Cleveland Browns. We know that. Among some of the others, the guy before Walter Payton, Gale Sayers, similar style to Payton almost. Unfortunately for him, injuries cut his career short, so he couldn't have the career that he would have liked. But still a terrific running back, a la what Walter Payton was. Of course, the kingpin in Detroit, Barry Sanders, who some widely would anoint him the greatest running back of all time. Even though he fell short of the rushing yards record, he probably would have surpassed it had the Detroit Lions supplied him with a winning team and found a way to keep him around till he abruptly retired in the end of the 98 season. Of course, LaDainian Tomlinson, also a terrific utility back, and beat you multiple ways like Walter Payton did with his time with the San Diego Chargers. He was a problem. Everyone knows that. Tony Dorsett with the Cowboys, same way. I mean, we talk about the stand-up teams they had in Dallas. We had Roger Staubach at quarterback and Drew Pearson as your number one wide receiver. Your top running back was, of course, Tony Dorsett. He himself was a problem. Adrian Peterson, maybe one of the stronger running backs in NFL history for his time. He was a problem, especially those years in Minnesota where nobody could even lay a hand on him. Among many others, Thurman Thomas. We talk about all-purpose running backs. For his time, Thurman Thomas was as good as anyone. I mean, he did it. He was the competent do-it-all back. And eventually, after he came around, a fellow named Marshall Faulk came around. It was basically the same way. All-purpose running back like Thurman Thomas. One of the as good as anyone, Earl Campbell with the Houston Oilers. Put the Houston Oilers franchise on the map for the longest time. It was just as good as all of them. Walter Payton, Barry Sanders, Jim Brown, all of them. Another one that was terrifically great. A lot of tons of pretty darn good running backs with very unique styles, had their own approach. They think one thing that separates them for their time, for among others, is their desire to be great and their desire to get better, because they had it right here. And there's some we can't say much about NFL running backs in today's game. And that's what some of those guys, especially Walter Payton, had when Walter Payton was the man amongst boys during that time. And Walter Payton today, 41 years ago today, surpassed Jim Brown for the career rushing number of 12,312. And at that point, before he retired, he himself had every freaking record imaginable. Like I said, some people call him the greatest running back of all time. Of course, it's up to debate. I don't debate it because I don't know what the criteria is. I say the same thing when I talk boxing. But when you talk about Walter Payton and his ability and what he did at that time, pound for pound, a top 10 NFL player, regardless of position. That should tell you just what Walter Payton was. You see in the NFL films all the time. You see the documentaries about him all the time. That's why they had to, not just how he embodied himself on the field, but better off of it. And that's why they call it the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award, because he was a class act off of it, as he was just a beauty on it. May God rest the soul of a top 10 great pound for pound NFL player of all time, the great Walter Payton. God, I might do more NFL great stuff coming up here soon, because we have a lot of good ones. Now we go to the world of boxing. And we're going to talk about, we like to talk about flash in our sport. Before Roy Jones, before Sugar Ray Leonard, and even before a guy like Hector Camacho and even Muhammad Ali, there was a kid from Cuba named Kid Gavilan. Kid Gavilan, known for the bolo punch. And we talk about the bolo punch, it's the wind-up that Sugar Ray Leonard eventually used in his career in honor of the great Kid Gavilan. Even Roy Jones used it a couple times. And it was on this night, 73 years ago in Havana, Cuba, he completed his 4-fight series with Jimmy Graham. Some significance of this. Actually, let me just break this down. The fight's not much to say, because Gavilan just put on a boxing lesson against a tough and durable Billy Graham, who was a bring-it-all kind of fighter. Kid Gavilan just boxed his ears off and just destroyed his face. The biggest one of this was the first fight outside the U.S. that was televised nationally in America. The first ever outside fight televised in America. We talk about this fight because it took place at the Studio Coliseum in Havana, Cuba. They have some weird Cuban Spanish name. I don't know how the hell you pronounce it, but that's what took place 73 years ago. And we talk about the career of Kid Gavilan, one of the unique fighters. I mean, he was very unique, a one-of-a-kind type fighter. Just we talk about flash at a time when sport needed it. He brought it, especially we talk about the Phantom Punch. And a career basically underrated and not talked about enough. And he's certainly up there among the all-time great welterweights. We talk about, of course, Ray Robinson, Ray Leonard, among many others. Henry Armstrong. I mean, he won the welterweight title, made successful title defenses, especially against the great Carmen Basilio, who was known for giving Sugar Ray Robinson all he can handle. But he had a shot at after he beat Graham a couple years later. He had tried to fight for the middleweight title, lost a closer than expected decision to Bubba Olsen in a fight that could have gone either way. And Kid Gavilan gave Olsen all he can handle. Now, mind you, Olsen was one of the premier victims of Sugar Ray Robinson. That should tell us how good of a fighter Bubba Olsen was. And Kid Gavilan, who was basically a welterweight, gave Olsen all he can handle in 1952. Then after that, he lost a suspect decision to a fighter named Johnny Saxton in a fight where everyone saw the fight, said Kid Gavilan was victimized by boxing politics, and we know how boxing politics work. We talk about Kid Gavilan, you talk about the flash. That's what Kid Gavilan brought. And in this particular, we talk about this fourth fight, where the first three fights were close. But in this fight, you saw the separation of the two because Gavilan made the adjustment to make sure he wasn't going to get caught by anything by Graham. And that's what happened. He floored him twice, although he wasn't credited with the knockdowns, cut him over both eyes, destroyed his nose, and just rooted to a unanimous decision win. And to conclude that four-fight rivalry, which he won 3-1. Now, you talk about Billy Graham, one of those pure tough guys. One of those pure tough guys that just keeps coming and coming. And that's what made his rivalry with Gavilan fantastic, because it was a stylistic, styles make fights type fights. But it was a case in this fight where Billy Graham, everything that took place with Graham on this particular night, just basically took its toll. And we talk about everything just added up. This rivalry, Gavilan was just too much. Now, he did come back later on to have to split a two-fight series himself with the great Carmen Basilio. But after the second fight, he just faded into obscurity. But Billy Graham was as tough as they come. Problem was, he met a flashy all-time great in Kid Gavilan, who's not talked about enough as an all-time great welterweight, because he's in that conversation with all of them. And we talk about Sugar Ray Robinson and Sugar Ray Leonard, the cream of that division. Henry Armstrong, Barney Ross is in that up there. Roberto Duran, Pernell Whitaker, Felix Trinidad, among others. I could probably throw some other names in there. But Gavilan is certainly in that conversation. And when you talk about flash, before we had Ray Leonard, Roy Jones, and even a guy like Hector Camacho and Manny Pacquiao, it was Kid Gavilan. For his time, he was the flash. And a real intriguing story coming out of Havana, Cuba. And one of the real terrific stories worth reading. And another interesting tidbit about this fight before I wrap this part of it up. One of the judges of this fight was none other than Nat Fleischer. For those of you guys that know the fight community, Nat Fleischer was the one that introduced us to a magazine called Ring Magazine, the Bible of boxing. And it was that same Nate Fleischer who judged this fight. And after that, spun it off to starting off the magazine known as Ring Magazine. And we know the phenomenon that became from that point to today. So there's a lot of history in this. The first fight outside of the U.S. that was televised here in the States, and Nat Fleischer, the guy that started Ring Magazine, was one of the three judges of this fight and scored it for the great Kid Gavilan. And it was 73 years ago in Cuba. Gavilan ended a rivalry with a tough, durable Billy Graham, basically gave him a boxing lesson and a beating just to separate himself from Graham and to retain the undisputed welterweight championship. I tell you, both fighters, and especially Nat Fleischer, is must-read stories. If you want to spare 5 minutes and have something to read about those three guys. And we fast forward a bit to what took place 30 years ago today. And the story of this one, it's a bit odd, but this was probably 2 years after its expiration date, but it's also something that could have taken place when it should have, had business been handled. It was Lennox Lewis versus Tommy Morrison at the Convention Center in Atlantic City. I bring up the business part because they had a tentative agreement for a heavyweight unification back in 1993, but then the Michael Bent obliteration of Tommy Morrison happened, and that fight went down the tubes. And from that point forward, the career of Tommy Morrison was just all over the place, as we well know. He got a disputed draw against Ross Purity in a fight where I thought Purity won. It was having it handed to him by Razor Ruddock until a haymaker left hook caught Ruddock on the chin, and Ruddock was down, and it was basically the fight. But it was basically a shop-worn Ruddock after his 2 fights with Mike Tyson. And Lennox Lewis still trying to bounce back after he lost to Oliver McCall in 1994. And we talk about this particular night, it was the epitome of what the career of Tommy Morrison was. When he delivered the hit, it was it. But in this fight, when he got hit, it was it. He was floored 4 times. The 4th time, of course, being the left hook, which has been Morrison's trademark. Lewis hit Morrison with the hook, put him on one knee, and everybody stopped the fight at the same time, preventing Morrison from getting seriously hurt. And this turned out to be the final fight of the career of Tommy Morrison, which was extremely topsy-turvy, going back to when he got obliterated and just beat down to a pulp by Ray Mercer 4 years before. And his career from that point forward was just all over the place. Beat George Foreman to win one of the second Tier 2 heavyweight championship. Lost it to Michael Bent. Had a tough fight on ESPN's Top Rank Boxing against Ross Purity, where Purity floored him twice. And in my opinion, I thought Purity won that fight. And Tommy Morrison was fortunate to escape with the draw. To the fight against Razor Ruddock, where he was floored twice, but the haymaker left hook caught Razor Ruddock with his hands down. That floored Ruddock, and that was basically it. And this fight was basically the final nail in the coffin of the career of Tommy Morrison. And when you think about the sporadic career of Tommy Morrison, it's a cultivation that we see in fighters all the time with stuff in and out of the ring. Because we take the stuff from outside the ring and bring it in, it's going to catch up with you. Because the lifestyle he was starting to live at that point added up. And we know what happened down the line. All the battles with alcohol and drug use, in and out of prisons, the disease diagnosis, they call it HIV. All I've heard stories debunked about that several times till he died in, I believe, like 2013. But we talk about bringing stuff from outside your profession, inside. If it gets to that point, you're a shot commodity. And that's exactly what happened to Tommy Morrison, starting with the loss to Ray Mercer, ending what took place 30 years ago to Lennox Lewis. And it was going to come up. Remind you again, they had a scheduled fight originally for 1993 when they both held championship belts. But Tommy Morrison couldn't hold his end of the deal when he was just wiped out in 1 round by Michael Bent, which knocked him out of an $8 million payday. And this fight was basically a case of whoever lost was basically done, more so on Morrison's end than Lewis, because Morrison had played with fire for the last 4 years before this night, and it caught up to him. From the Lennox Lewis angle, it's basically his perfect performance at that point under Emmanuel Stewart. When you consider what happened to him a year before when he was 1-2'd by Oliver McCall, got the 1-2 piece and was down, and put on a picture performance with the use of the jab, the uppercut, and the left hook. Wasn't known for just a lethal right cross that he abominated Razor Ruddock and Mike Weaver with, but showed a complete arsenal and basically just picked Tommy Morrison apart. And from that point forward, the ascension to Lennox Lewis as a top 5 all-time great heavyweight began. Granted, it was a Tommy Morrison who was basically a year past his expiration date as a fighter, but Lennox Lewis hadn't looked that good in quite a while. And from that point forward, he took off. And the rest is history for him. But I point out the fact that a fight in 1993 for one simple reason. If you don't take care of business, you can lose out on a lot in the fight game. And even though they did fight in 1995, the fight 2 years before it, had they fought in 93, there would have been a lot at stake. Because the winner could have probably fought the winner of the Vander Holyfield-Riddick Bowe rematch. And both guys had at least an $8 million payday. But Tommy Morrison couldn't hold his end of the deal. And that went splat till the 1995, when basically both guys were, in the case of the loser, where the loser of the fight was essentially done. It was basically Tommy Morrison And the rest of his career and his life spoke for itself. I mean, he signed initially with Don King to try and get a fight with Mike Tyson as a cash out, but that's when the disease diagnosis took place, and his life just basically unraveled from that point forward. And it was just a crying shame. The case of hit and get hit is going to catch up to you at some point. That was the career of Tommy Morrison. When he delivered a hit, especially with that left hook, because when he hit you with that left hook, it was it. But when he got hit, and he got hit a lot, it was also it. Look at the Ray Mercer, Michael Bent, and Lennox Lewis losses as the end result. And especially in other fights where he had to come from the canvas. I mean, he took a vicious pounding at a fight in 1992 against Joe Hip, where he had every facial feature fractured from his jaw to his eye bone. And the draw to Ross Purity, where he was beaten to a pulp, just luckily escaped with a draw. That's how topsy-turvy Tommy Morrison's career became after he lost to Ray Mercer in 1991, and it ended 30 years ago tonight at Atlantic City. A case of a fighter bringing stuff outside the ring into it, and because of it, it caught up to him. Is it for Lennox Lewis? The rest for him is history. The multiple world titles, the two literal wipeouts of Evander Holyfield, the obliteration of Mike Tyson in 2002, the ascension to a top 5 all-time great heavyweight. This fight was basically at that time, his perfect performance, a performance of perfection under Emanuel Stewart. And this is what Emanuel Stewart was trying to get Lennox Lewis to do. Almost converted him to like a heavyweight Thomas Hearns almost, because he had the lethal right cross, but in this particular fight, he was more than just a left jab, right cross fighter. He brought more to the table, and Tommy Morrison was his victim. And from that point forward, the greatness of Lennox Lewis ascended, and we know what happened at the end. And I close out on a topic that's been running wild in the boxing community, and now I'm going to have to just pick this thing apart. It's the Hall of Fame voting that's taking place this week, and there are morons who are intentionally ignorant enough to think Gennady Golovkin, a.k.a. Triple G, is not a Hall of Fame fighter. When you make as many successful title defenses as he has, you're in Hall of Fame by default. We consider some of the guys that are already in there. The problem is not Gennady Golovkin. The problem is the process. Because I get it. There are a lot of fighters that should be on the ballot and in there that we don't have it there. I mean, Darius Mikuszewski, Nigel Benn, Mildred Taylor, just to name a few of them. But to go as far as to say Gennady Golovkin isn't worthy of being a first ballot Hall of Famer is one of the most moronic and ignorant things you could ever say out of your mouth. You might as well live in a mental hospital, get checked for CTE, and at that point, just live in a mental hospital if you genuinely think he's not a Hall of Famer. Now, did he beat the standout guy in this division? No, I'll give you that. But we talk about longevity. Longevity sometimes takes care of itself. And he basically fought everyone he could possibly fought. Because remember, fighters were trying to stall him out, most notably Canelo Alvarez. And, even some other guys that didn't want to fight him. Erislandy Lara didn't want a piece of him for the longest time either. When you talk about the run that he had as the middleweight champ, that alone puts him in the Hall of Fame class. I mean, no one's saying the guy's as great as Sugar Ray Robinson or Marvin Hagler or even a Bernard Hopkins. No one's even saying that. But when you talk about the standards that the Boxing Hall of Fame set for the longest time, and some of the guys that are in there because of the low standards, Gennady Golovkin surpasses it. But even if they were higher, he still surpasses it. The guy's still a Hall of Famer. I mean, how can you say this guy's not a Hall of Famer? What's your criteria? If you talk about quality resumes, well, guess what? There are a lot of fighters in that Hall of Fame who have less quality resumes than Gennady Golovkin. It's a no-brainer. I mean, the guy is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He fought basically everyone he could fight. It is not his fault that some of the top guys want to know parts of him or try to stall him out. Now, again, no one's saying the guy's in the same category as Ray Robinson or Marvin Hagler or even a Jake LaMotta or a guy like even a Bernard Hopkins. But he certainly is a first ballot Hall of Famer. And if you think otherwise, something is wrong with you. That's the end of the discussion. I get it. There are other fighters that belong just as much as he does, if not more. And that's on the Hall of Fame process more than Gennady Golovkin. But he belongs. And he's going to get in whether you guys like it or not. Just leave it be. there's some fighters that belong in there. They do. I mean, I can point to a bunch of them. Not Nigel Benn, Darius Mikuszewski, Mildred Taylor, Chris Eubank, Simbu Calabe. I don't know why Simbu Calabe's name is not even in the Hall of Fame ballot. I don't even see that on there. Some of those guys belong to the Hall of Fame too. Over Gennady Golovkin, I understand it. But to say Gennady Golovkin's not a Hall of Famer, how can you be that moronically stupid? And intentionally moronically stupid? Because that's what you are at the end of the day if you think he doesn't belong. One of the longer reigns in middleweight championship history. I mean, as in a sport where titles bounce around like a bad habit these days for various reasons, for him to have the long reign that he did says a lot. And you got to give him his due for that. No one's saying the guy's Sugar Ray Robinson. No one's saying he's Jake LaMotta or even a Marvin Hagler. The second the Boxing Hall of Fame put Arturo Gatti in the Hall of Fame, everything changed, and now everything's a hot mess because of that and the process. It's not a slight on Arturo Gatti. No. It's a slight on how the Boxing Hall of Fame process works. And everyone there needs to call that out instead of worrying about who goes in versus who doesn't go in, because that's that's where the problem lies, is the process and how it's handled. Because there's some glaring omissions and some glaring bad ones too. Think about that for a minute. I mean, I've said this to the fight community for the longest time. You guys do the worst job cherry picking who you think belongs to the Hall of Fame or not. You guys need to do a better job of observing everybody that's out there. There are glaring omissions. Yes, there is. You can't do anything about it because that's on the process of how the Boxing Hall of Fame works. Because it's different than the football or basketball or baseball or even an international sport like soccer. Whole different criteria, whole different dynamic, lower bar for obvious reasons. But you guys still pick and choose who you think belongs, and you also pick and choose who you don't belong. Doesn't work that way. It got to be universal across the board. Shout out Tim Monk. I just saw you just pop in here. I hope you're doing good, my Ben. Long time no see. Hope to catch with you soon. And on that note, I will wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. I will be back tomorrow night. If you missed any of this or any other episodes, you can catch the replays on Apple, Spotify, and the iHeart apps if you have those on your particular mobile devices or computer laptops. And as always, as I tell everyone at the end of the shows, make self-care your number one priority in life. Always take care of yourself first before you take care of everything else. Focus on you. Stay true to yourself. Good things will follow. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else in life matters. Something I learned a long time ago. And on that note, have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless. And I will see you tomorrow.